Alrighty, so this is the video presentation for the threat analysts on IT sabotage with Goliath National Bank. We are the threat analysts. Natalie's our information security officer. Callie is our IT risk analyst. Sade is our IT risk analyst. Joel's our compliance analyst. Hamza is our IT threat analyst. Tyler is our compliance analyst, and Dan is our behavioral analyst. Next, we're going to run you through the analysis and approach to our case study. Basically outlines how we're going to approach this case with the goal of securing our e-trading algorithms without having to pay any of the ransom.
At Goliath National Bank, ransomware was placed on their e-trading servers. A few components of GNB's e-trading algorithms had surfaced on the dark web. They were told that if the requested ransom was not paid, all of the e-trading system's information would be exposed. This poses a huge risk to the company as they have invested $30 million into their e-trading system and is a critical component of keeping their company successful in the future. It is believed that this happened due to a possible insider threat of an employee, possibly a privileged employee who is working with an external group such as possible human intelligence sources. It was found that technical vulnerabilities were exploited within the servers. The SOC had reported risk about being targeted by sophisticated threat actors. However, nothing had been done.
The Goliath National Bank has a ransomware placed on their e-trading servers with $30 million worth of trading information on them. We have identified that a potential insider threat, one of the employees at the company, potentially released the information onto the dark web. Based on the risk matrix to the right, we have identified GNB to be a high-risk company since it is possible for them to lose their e-trading systems, which would result in major consequences for the company. Some of the key assets at stake for the company include their e-trading systems, trading algorithms, personal information of employees, and company financial information. We have to protect the company before their $30 million trading systems are destroyed or they have to pay the ransom.
So the next step is to identify the threat vector. We need to identify how the ransomware got into the system, whether it was an external threat or someone from the inside helped the company do it. So looking at the data and analyzing and doing some research, we realize that privileged users often pose the highest level of insider threat. And one of our employees are already suspected in the case study. So what we really need is to implement some effective case access controls in place. So what the company needs to do at this point is to redefine the access control in their company, what users have access to what information. The e-trading system logs algorithms should only be available to high-level board members or the CISO of the company if he needs to access that information. So discretionary access control would be redefined by the stakeholders and the board of directors of the company who would determine who would have access to what information. Critical to business in the e-trading forum. Next, we need to identify the potential protection measures we can put in place, which is the CIA triad. It's important that the information is only accessed by the authorized parties, people with proper access controls, as well as we need to make sure the information is not being altered or stolen, as well as it stays remain available when the company needs it to run the operations. In our case scenario, the information was stolen rather than being altered, but it's important that we look at from every aspect going forward in the future. So it's important that the information is encrypted. It's only accessed by the person who have the correct credentials to access it. Make sure we use cryptography, one-way hashing to make sure the integrity remains intact of the information, and we can also do backups and redundancy just in case there's an attack and we need to access the information again. Now, considering the insider threat, we need to monitor users, whether they're privileged as well as the personnel who are part of the insider threat program and their access to information. We would want to implement a user monitoring system. All end devices, it would be after all the employees as well as the privileged users, third-party contractors, as well as the personnel part of the insider threat program. The detection system would also look for external storage hardware if someone is bringing in a multimedia storage from outside of the company to steal any potential data. User movement would be tracked by the program, and it would alert the security personnel if the person is doing something malicious or outside the security policies. Next, we need to identify access to information. Who is identifying the information, whether they have access to it or not. So we want to implement an analysis program to track user activities and identify any risks or unusual behavior. If there's a threat pattern, the system would log it, and if it continues to grow, it would trigger then alert the program personnel of the insider threat program. To have an effective threat inquiry program in place and to keep it confidential, we have to have a insider threat program within the company with a proper chain of command. We would also want to schedule exercises to test the responsibility against an insider threat, just in case if it happens in the future. The program personnel would communicate the information to the stakeholders and higher ups to determine what to do with the information and how it can be damaging, log everything in the file for future references and sources. And if there's new information coming in, we can refine our thresholds and triggers to adapt according to the new insider threat trend. Then we want to look at the current policies and procedures implemented by the company. The company basically only conducts audit reviews of their employees, their communication skills, behavior with the past employers. They look at training of threat. It's emerging threat. Insider threat is still an emerging field, and it's important that we inform the employees. The company have limited technology. They allow few connection to the network, have multiple firewalls in place as well. The monitoring program by the insider threat, they monitor suspicious activities of their employee usage.
Throughout the detection phase, continuous monitoring on the network's personal activity, unauthorized personnel, devices and softwares attempting to get added, and the continuous monitoring of current programs are effective techniques you have a secure network. Another effective technique is to be able to evaluate anomalous activity to understand what targets are being attacked and what methods are being used. By using tools such as Honeypot, this will allow a decoy for attackers to trick them and show their methods and techniques that are being used to attack the network. By using an intrusion detection system, this will allow to detect any vulnerabilities or exploits against a target. As well as having an intrusion prevention system, this will be able to block threats as well as detect them as they are entering the system. These methods put in place will allow for the network to detect any. These methods put in place will be able to detect and inform personnel of any vulnerabilities or attacks to the system.
So for the respond part of our case study, we're basically going over the main points, which are response planning, which is response processes are coordinated with the appropriate stakeholders. Crisis communication, where communication between everybody involved is laid out and everybody knows who to talk to. Analysis is taking what we figured out from the ransomware and noticing how we can make it better. Mitigation is to make sure that next time anything happens, the damage is as small as possible, and then we also want to make improvements on examine the lessons that we learned and we incorporate future responses. So for response planning, we really want to make sure that that personnel know their roles and the order of operations is when a response is needed. We also want to make sure that everybody is reviewing the affected systems and recreating the event, so we know exactly how the ransomware was placed on the GNB servers. We also want to make sure we're coordinating with our stakeholders so that they know exactly what's going on with our response plans. So for next, we want to mitigate the event. So the action of mitigation is actually the action of reducing the severity, seriousness, or painfulness of an event. So for this structure, we encourage firms to individually assess threats most relevant to their firm and to develop a risk-based approach to response allocation. The structure is also flexible enough to allow firms to scale implementation based on their business models and available resources. So for critiquing our existing measures, which is why the ransomware was placed, is we want to prioritize on crucial security incidents as well as common security threats. We also want to verify configurations as well as checking networks and statuses. We want to contain as well as isolate the problem when it was discovered, and we also want to repair repair and remove any vulnerabilities that appeared after the attack. Now, we want to work on our incident response plan. For us, it is preparation, identification, containment, investigation, eradication, recovery, and then we want to go over the lessons that we learned. So some things we might do post the attack. We want to hire incident response analysts. We want to continuous testing of incident response plan. We want to set policy levels for the incident response, and we also want to have incident reports so people know exactly what happened.
For recovery, we will establish a chain of command. This will be the Chief Information Security Officer, and they would be responsible for establishing the mission, strategy, and program plans to make sure assets and technology are protected. Then we will go into the tactical phase, and this includes initiation, execution, and termination. We would create and maintain a list of people, processes, and technology assets allowing the mission to be achieved. And also, we would document when the recovery plan could be implemented and who can implement it. Then we will go into the strategic recovery phase. This is a 3-step recovery plan, which deals with updating metrics, planning and executing a recovery plan improvements overall. And this would be improving the plan for the institution's overall security based on the tactical results and continuously executing communications. Then for long-term recovery initiatives, we will update systems and protect financial servers in the future. And this will also do with monthly training of new and old employees, employee awareness, and client trust. And that brings us to communications, the recovery phase for that. And that has to do with client trust and stakeholders. So we will have to reassure clients and regain their trust by offering incentives and, designating individuals who will be authorized to speak on behalf of the event. And then with stakeholders, we would go through public relations. This could be internal, external, PR personnel. We will go through internal communications. So this is communicating recovery activities and to inform individuals of any change in policies and procedures.
And this brings us to our lessons learned. These are some of our takeaways from this case. We listed out a few, including a few preventative measures for the future. We want to ensure that audit records are always documented and that hardware is managed to ensure only authorized devices can gain access. Another preventative measure that we want to use moving forward are red team exercises. These will test the overall strength and security against our external threats. And in addition to testing against the external threats, we want to ensure that we're using tools to test the integrity and effectiveness of the insider threat inquiry and response processes. So that concludes our presentation on the IT sabotage for Goliath National Bank. Thank you so much for your time.